Hello, my name is Brooke Adams, and this is my Assessment for Learning case study presentation for EDU 718B. I'll share the major components of my project, what I learned from the process, and how it influenced my instructional decisions. This presentation is organized into 5 major sections that mirror my written case study. I'll begin by sharing my grading and evaluation practices, then discuss how my kindergarten PLC collaborates around assessments. I'll then walk through the 3 short cycle CFAs we designed, show how we analyze the data, and finally explain the intervention and extension cycle that followed. I'll end with my reflections on what I learned and what I would do differently. In kindergarten, even with our youngest learners, grading serves several important purposes. First, it allows me as the teacher to see how well students are mastering state standards. It also guides my instruction decisions because it allows me to see who is ready to move forward and who still needs support. Grading also helps motivate students by showing them the progress they're making, even with the small skills like letter recognition. And finally, it communicates student growth to families. My philosophy, as well as the philosophy of my PLC team, really aligns with Dillian Williams' view that grading should reflect students' current level of understanding and not the mistakes that they make along the way. In my classroom, assessment happens continuously throughout the week. I use daily formative checks during lessons to monitor immediate understanding, along with weekly formative assessments to look for short-term patterns. Our PLC also creates medium-length CFAs that assess learning over a slightly longer instructional cycle. In addition to those, STAR assessments are administered 3 times a year to provide benchmark data. All this information is reported through our standards-based report card that we created as a team, and I communicate progress regularly with families through folders, newsletters, and remind messages. Our kindergarten PLC plays a central role in how we plan instruction and analyze student learning. Our team includes 4 kindergarten teachers, 2 instructional coaches, 1 for literacy and 1 for math, and occasionally our principal or assistant principal. We've established clear roles within the group, including facilitators who guide the agenda, a timekeeper who keeps us on track, and a note taker who documents our decisions. We also have norms that we follow and are displayed every day. We meet twice a week during our protected planning time, and the culture of our PLC is very collaborative and student-centered. We share resources, discuss instructional challenges, and analyze assessment data together. Although we teach in separate classrooms, we view all of our kindergarten students as our students, which helps ensure consistency and high-quality instruction across the grade level. Our PLC uses a very intentional process to design our common formative assessments. We start by identifying the essential new Georgia ELA standards because this year our entire team has had to essentially rebuild our assessment process from the ground up. With the new standards being adopted, we've had to revisit how we unpack the standards and how we write our learning targets and ensure that they align with our instruction. Once we select a standard, we deconstruct it into clear, student-friendly learning targets so both teachers and students understand the expectation. From there, from those learning targets, we design CFAs that align directly to the new standard and to our phonics pacing with 95% group. After the CFAs are administered, we meet as a PLC to analyze the results, look for trends, and determine our next instructional steps. This process has been especially important this year because we are still learning the new standards together as a team, and we want to ensure our assessments are accurately measuring what students are expected to know. The data from each CFA then drives how we group students for intervention and extension. For this teaching and assessing cycle, our kindergarten PLC focused on Georgia ELA Standard KFP.1, which addresses phoneme and grapheme correspondence. This skill is foundational in kindergarten because it lays the groundwork for decoding and early reading. To measure student mastery, we created 3 short cycle CFAs that aligned directly to our weekly phonics instruction. The first CFA assessed lowercase t and p, and the second focused on lowercase n and a, and the third assessed the uppercase versions of all 4 letters. We also introduced the learning targets in clear, student-friendly language. I can name each letter. I can say the sound for each letter makes. These targets help students understand exactly what they are expected to learn that week and allowed us to connect instruction, assessment, and feedback in a meaningful way. For each of the 3 CFAs, our PLC created very clear success criteria so that both teachers and students understood what mastery looked like. Because each assessment had a small number of items, students needed to earn a 100% accuracy to be considered proficient. Students scoring between 50 and 99% were placed in the approaching category, and anyone below 50% fell in the does not meet range. All CFAs were administered one-on-one, which is developmentally appropriate for kindergartners, and ensure that we capture the true understanding rather than distractions or environmental factors. These success criteria were intentionally aligned with our 95% group phonics pacing, so our instruction, assessments, and expectations were all connected. Establishing these criteria allowed us to maintain consistency across all kindergarten classrooms and gave us a reliable structure for analyzing student learning. When we analyzed the results from all 3 CFAs, several clear patterns emerged. As you can see in the graph, about half of my class consistently scored in the proficient range across all assessments. Many students demonstrated stronger accuracy with letter sounds compared to letter names, which is a trend that we often see in early kindergarten. We also noticed that the same small group of students remained in the does not meet category across all 3 CFAs, indicating a deeper need for targeted multisensory intervention. There was very little movement between categories from week to week, which suggests that simply teaching the letter once wasn't enough for some students to internalize them. Another interesting trend occurred on the 3rd CFA that assessed only uppercase letters. Proficiency slightly dipped there, which told us that students needed a more cumulative review as the week progressed and more opportunities to connect uppercase and lowercase letter forms. This data trend guided the instructional decisions you'll see in the next sections. Once our PLC analyzed the CFA data, we immediately used it to make instructional decisions for the following week. We used those groupings of students in the 3 categories, proficient, approaching, and does not meet, and we used these groups as a basis for our intervention and extension plans. For students who missed items, we provided immediate teaching, often using multisensory supports such as sand trays, letter manipulatives, and sand tracing, which I will get into in the next slide. These strategies helped reinforce phoneme grapheme connections in ways that were developmentally appropriate for our kindergartners. We also strengthened the homeschool connection by sending parent notes that explained which letters and sounds students needed additional practice with. Families were encouraged to review these letters nightly, so students were getting the repeated exposure across environments. Throughout the cycle, we monitored progress weekly and adjusted instruction based on the patterns we continued to see. This made our data actionable and ensured that students received timely, targeted supports rather than waiting for a longer assessment cycle. Based on the CFA data, our PLC developed a targeted intervention and extension plan tailored to the needs of each performance group. Students in the does not meet category participated in Orton Gillingham multisensory routines, which included sand writing, sky writing, finger tracing, and repeated sound practice. These students needed explicit hands-on instruction to strengthen their recognition and build those phoneme grapheme connections. Students in the approaching group received 95% group intervention lessons, which provided structured repetition and visual supports. Their instructional focus was on increasing automaticity and correcting specific errors, especially when distinguishing between similar letters like P, T, and an A. Students who had already mastered the target letters moved into the extension activities that focused on blending vowel consonant and consonant vowel consonant words using those letters. This allowed them to apply their foundational letter sound knowledge to early decoding tasks and building their fluency. Overall, each group received instruction that directly matched their performance level, ensuring that students' time during intervention was purposeful and aligned to their specific needs. Our intervention and extension cycle took place over a 3-week period from September 8th through September 28th. During this time, our PLC met weekly to review how students were responding to instruction, share observations, and make adjustments as needed. To ensure instructional fidelity, we followed both the IMSE Orton-Gillingham routines that we have previously been trained on, as well as the 95% group and intervention manuals exactly as they were written. Our literacy coach also conducted regular check-ins with each group to provide support and verify that the instructional routines and pacings were consistent across the classrooms. At the end of the cycle, we administered a post-assessment that mirrored the original CFAs. This allowed us to compare the pre- and post data to determine which students showed growth, which interventions were most effective, and which students still needed additional support. The timeline and fidelity checks ensured that our approach was organized, systematic, and grounded in the best practice. This project gave me several important insights about teaching and assessment. I learned just how powerful short cycle assessments are in identifying specific learning patterns, especially when working with foundational skills like phoneme and grapheme correspondence. I also saw the impact of having clear success criteria and how that improves transparency for both teachers and students. Working collaboratively with my PLC strengthened the entire process, and our targeted intervention groups were most effective when they were directly aligned with our CFA data. There are also several things that I would do differently or just change up going forward. One major change is that I would incorporate additional assessment formats beyond the one-on-one. The one-on-one can be very time-consuming, although they are very developmentally appropriate for kindergarten. They do take a lot of time, and I realized that I could collect just as meaningful data from either a checklist at the end of my lessons, either like a whiteboard quick check, an exit ticket, or a guided table assessment. I think this would increase the efficiency and allow me to gather more frequent data as well. I would also like to build in more cumulative review throughout the week, especially for uppercase letters. In addition, I would provide families with targeted home practice earlier in the cycle so that students receive additional exposure outside of school. These adjustments would strengthen the next cycle and make my assessment process even more effective and manageable, I believe. Thank you so much for taking the time to view my presentation. This assessment for learning case study has helped me grow in how I use data, collaborate with my team, and use intentional assessment practices to support the early literacy development in my classroom. It strengthened my understanding of how assessment truly drives instruction and how it is important to continue to reflect and adjust based on what students need. I appreciate the opportunity to share my learning, and I'm happy to answer questions or to discuss any part of the process in more detail. Thank you so much.